Montana Territory. August 1878, the sun beat down hard on the town of Willow Creek, the kind of dry heat that turned dust into smoke under wagon wheels. Men packed tight in front of the saloon, crowding around the makeshift auction stage set up near the general store, mouths dry with whiskey and whatever cruel thing they meant to spend their silver on. She stood on that stage like a cracked porcelain figure, bare feet, torn calico dress, hair matted with travel and shame. Her name was Norah Harlow, 22 years old, and she had not spoken a word since the marshal dragged her off that freight wagon 3 days ago. A tag hung from her wrist, scrawled with 3 words: "Damaged, no returns." The man running the auction cleared his throat. "This one's no stranger to trouble. Found her passed out near the Bitterroot Pass, no papers, no husband, claims to have been taken by raiders, but we got no proof. She's been marked as damaged goods. Starting bid, $5. Laughter rose up from the crowd, mean and sharp-edged. A few men tossed out half-hearted bids, more for the joke than the woman. Norah didn't flinch. Her eyes stared out, hollow and far off, like her soul had already packed up and left her body behind. Then a voice cut through the noise. $10. Heads turned. At the edge of the crowd, a tall man stepped forward, dust on his boots, hat low over his brow. He looked young but worn, like he had carried too much too early. His name was Gideon Jameson, a cattleman from the southern stretch of the territory. He had not come to town for a woman, but the moment he saw Norah, something hit him in the ribs like a hammer. Not pity, not desire. Recognition. "Son, you do not want this one," the auctioneer said, chuckling. "She's got no voice, no papers, might be touched in the head. You could do better." Gideon's voice was steady. "I said 10. No one else matched it." The gavel came down. "Sold." She did not move when he approached, only blinked slow when he offered his hand. "My name's Gideon," he said, quiet enough for only her to hear. "I am not here to hurt you." She hesitated. Then she placed her small, dirt-streaked hand in his. He led her away from the crowd, away from the stairs. She stumbled once, and he steadied her with one arm around her shoulders. She did not pull away. They stayed the night in the livery's back room, where Gideon usually bunked when in town. He gave her the cot and slept on the floor. She said nothing, just sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall like it held her last memory. The next morning, she followed him without question as he saddled his horse and packed supplies. He bought a second horse for her, nothing fancy, just a quiet mare with kind eyes. "You ride?" he asked. She nodded once. They rode out of Willow Creek before the sun had cleared the mountains. Gideon's Ranch sat a day's ride south, tucked into a wide valley surrounded by pine hills. He had built it with his own 2 hands, every board and fence post. It was not much, but it was his. When they arrived, she looked around in silence, eyes scanning the corral, the smokehouse, the small cabin. He opened the door for her, let her step in first. "I have only 1 bed," he said, careful in his tone. "You can have it. I will sleep by the hearth." She turned to him then, her voice soft and cracked from disuse. "Why did you buy me?" He met her gaze. "Because you looked like you forgot what safe felt like." Her breath caught. She looked away. "I will not ask you to talk," he said. "But you do not owe me anything. You are not property." Norah sat on the edge of the bed and took off her boots. Her voice came again, quiet but stronger. "They took me from my wagon outside Bozeman, killed my brother, left me in the canyon. I walked for days." He nodded slowly, not pressing. "I am not touched in the head," she said. "I never thought you were." That night she did not sleep. He heard her breathing, shallow and fast, long after the fire had gone to coals. He did not try to fix it. He just stayed there, close enough for her to know she was not alone. Over the next week, she helped where she could, feeding the hens, mending shirts, keeping water on the fire. She did not speak often, but when she did, it was with more strength. Gideon never asked more than she could give. When she flinched at sudden movement, he slowed his gestures. When her hands shook at nightfall, he lit the lantern before the dark could settle. One afternoon, she stood beside him as he worked on the fence line, handing him nails without being asked. Her hair was clean now, tied back with a strip of linen. Her skin had color again. She looked over the field and said, "You built all this yourself," he nodded. "Why alone?" he shrugged. "Had a brother. We started it together. He died in a stampede 3 years back. After that, I just kept going." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "You are kind. I am just trying to do right." "No," she said, voice firmer. "You are kind." That evening they sat on the porch while the sun dropped behind the hills. She leaned against the post, arms around her knees. He sat beside her, not touching, just watching the sky burn gold and then fade. "I was not a virgin," she said, voice low, "before they got me. I had a man back in Helena. He left when he found out I could not give him children." Gideon turned to her. His voice was steady. "You are not less because of what someone else did to you." Her eyes met his. "But I am damaged." He shook his head, slow and sure. "You are perfect to me." She blinked fast and her lip trembled, but she did not look away this time. He reached out, not fast, not forceful, and brushed his fingers over her knuckles. She let him. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. Not because she had something to prove, but because she had finally been seen. By early September, the first yellow touches had begun to show at the edges of the cottonwoods lining the creek behind the cabin. The summer heat still held during the day, but the evenings had cooled just enough that Norah started closing the shutters before dusk. Gideon noticed she did it without being asked, the same way she now collected the eggs at sunrise and poured water over the porch steps to keep the dust down. She moved through the days with quiet purpose, her presence like a gentle stitch in the rhythm of his life. One morning she followed him out to the pasture without a word, carrying a tin pail with bread heels and potato peels. When he looked over, she gave a small nod toward the hog pen. "I've been meaning to take care of that," she said, brushing her sleeve across her brow. He leaned against the fence rail. "You don't have to do every chore just because it's there." "I know," she said, "but it feels better when my hands are busy." The sun lit her hair as she crouched beside the trough, her movements steady and unhurried. Gideon didn't speak again until she stood. "You ever work land before?" he asked. Norah wiped her hands on her skirts. "My ma was a seamstress, but I spent more time helping my brother. We had a bit of land east of Helena. Chickens, goats, nothing big. He taught me how to set a snare and patch a saddle." She paused, then added, "He always said I was more useful than half the boys in town." Gideon smiled faintly. Sounds like he knew what he was talking about. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't think less of me for knowing how to gut a rabbit." "I think I'd be a fool not to be grateful," he said. That night, she lingered beside him as he sharpened his knife by lantern glow. Her voice came low, almost as if testing the air. "I found a silver ring once, buried in the dirt behind the barn back home. It was bent nearly flat, but I kept it." He didn't look up from the blade. "You still have it?" "No," she said. "I left it behind when I ran. I think about it sometimes. It wasn't worth anything, but it felt like a secret between me and the land." Gideon set the knife aside. "We can dig here if you like. Might be something this place wants to give you." Norah glanced at him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "You don't think I'm strange for remembering things that don't matter?" "I think remembering's part of healing." She turned back toward the bed, but paused at the door. "You speak like a man who's had to do a lot of that." He didn't answer right away. "I speak like a man who's still learning how." The next day, when the wind picked up, Norah took a length of muslin and began stitching it into strips, quiet and focused in the corner of the porch. By sundown, she'd made curtains for the front windows. Gideon didn't say anything, but that evening when she came inside, the hearth was swept, and a sprig of pine sat in a chipped jar on the table. Days passed. She began leaving her boots beside his by the door. They shared meals without words, and sometimes with them, though always new ones about her mother's hands smelling like lavender soap, about Gideon's first failed attempt to shoe a horse, about the sound cotton makes when it burns. One morning, she didn't come outside. When he stepped in, she was sitting at the edge of the bed, holding a small, folded piece of fabric. Her face was still, and her bare feet didn't reach the floor. "I had a dream," she said. "I was back in the canyon." But this time when I woke, I wasn't afraid. He crouched beside her, hands resting on his knees. "What changed?" "I think," she said slowly. "I knew I'd come back here." When he didn't speak, she unfolded the cloth. Inside was a small, carved button shaped like a flower. "I found this under the floorboard while sweeping. I thought maybe it was from your brother's shirt." He took it in his hand, studying the worn edges. "No, but it's old. Could have belonged to whoever lived here before us." She met his eyes. "Us," he nodded once. She leaned forward then, slowly, and pressed her forehead to his. "I'm still learning how to be here," she whispered. "You're already here," he said, voice steady. That night she asked if he'd sit beside her until she fell asleep. He did, and when her breath settled into soft, even waves, he stayed a while longer, watching the firelight flicker across the beams overhead. And when he finally lay down beside the hearth, it was with the sure knowledge that she would be there in the morning. The first frost came in the night. Gideon woke early to the pale glint of ice along the window panes, the air inside the cabin sharp enough to sting the lungs. He stoked the stove before she stirred, careful not to let the iron door clang shut, then stepped outside to split more kindling. The sky was dull and colorless, and the smell of wood smoke was already thick in the valley. Norah appeared in the doorway wrapped in one of his wool shirts, sleeves rolled to her elbows. "You've got a limp," she said, her voice clear. He rested the axe against the chopping block. "Twisted my knee hauling a calf out of a dry ditch. It'll ease up." "You didn't limp yesterday." "Didn't start hurting till I laid down." She crossed the yard, eyes narrowed. "Let me wrap it." He hesitated. "I helped tend wounded men after the Helena fire," she added. "I know what I'm doing." He led her back inside without a word. She knelt beside him as he sat, unbuttoned the leg of his trousers, and examined the swelling with practiced fingers. Her touch was firm, not hesitant. He watched her face. Instead of the injury, there was a knot of concentration between her brows, and her mouth was set in a way that made him want to smooth it with his thumb. "You've done this more than once," he said. "A neighbor boy fell through a hayloft once. His leg bent wrong. I was the only one nearby." She wound the cloth tight, tying it off without looking up. "I held it together until he stopped screaming, then I cried behind the barn." Gideon's voice came quiet. "You always carry it all alone." Her hands stilled. "It's easier than explaining." "I'd listen." She stood and stepped back, wiping her palms on her skirt. "I know." Later that day, she took the rifle out back and lined up tin cans on the fence. When she fired, the crack startled the hens, but she didn't flinch. Gideon leaned against the porch post, watching. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" he called. "My brother made me learn when I turned 16, she said without turning. "He didn't think I'd ever need it. I proved him wrong." She hit 3 cans in a row, then lowered the rifle and faced him. "I want to help with the cattle," she said. "I can ride, and I know how to move them without stirring a stampede." He didn't answer right away. "I'm not afraid of the work," she added. "I know you're not," he said. "But I don't want you getting caught under hooves because my knee's half useless." "I wasn't asking," she said. He studied her a long moment, then nodded once. By dusk, they'd driven a small group up from the lower pasture, Norah riding ahead to keep them from scattering. She moved with easy control, body light in the saddle, every command low and deliberate. He watched her from the ridge, pride coiling slow in his chest. When the cattle were penned and the horses cooled, she dismounted and wiped her brow. "You trust me more now?" she asked. "I already did," he said, "but it's good to see it with my own eyes." She smiled faintly, then looked toward the barn. "I want to build something," she said. "A small coop for the hens. They're too exposed where they are. You know how, I've seen it done. If you teach me what to cut, I can do the rest." He agreed, and the next morning they laid out planks in the yard. She marked lengths with chalk while he steadied the boards for sawing. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked, not looking up. "Not for a long time," he said. "What kept you here?" He ran his fingers along a rough edge. It was the only thing that still made sense after everything else fell apart. She nodded once, then stood. "I think that's why I stayed too." That night the wind rose sharp and cold across the hills. She brought her blanket near the hearth but didn't lie down. He poured water into the kettle, then turned to find her watching him. "I don't want to sleep alone tonight," she said. He paused, then crossed to her. "I'll stay right beside you," he said. "Just say the word if I want you to," she interrupted, voice steady. "You make the dark stop pressing in." He laid down the extra quilt, then eased beside her. She turned toward him, close enough that her breath warmed his collarbone. "I don't know how to be with someone who's good," she said softly. "Not really." "You don't have to know," he whispered. "You just have to be here." She touched his hand, fingers curling into his, and when the fire burned low and the wind howled outside, they didn't move apart, not once. The mornings had turned sharp and silver gray, breath rising in small clouds as Gideon hauled water from the well. Norah was already outside when he came back from the shed, crouched beside the coop. They'd nearly finished. She was smoothing a corner of the roof with a plane, her jaw set with quiet focus. He watched her a moment before setting down the bucket. "The shingles'll hold fine without sanding." "I know," she said, not looking up. "But I want it to last through the snow." He crouched beside her, laying a hand on the edge of the coop. "You planning on staying that long?" Her hand paused. She turned her face toward him, the morning light catching in her lashes. "I haven't thought about leaving." He didn't respond, didn't need to. Instead, he reached for the plane and worked beside her, the two of them silent save for the rasp of metal against wood. Around them, the frost began to lift off the grass, curling back into the earth. That afternoon, they rode west toward the ridge where the cattle sometimes wandered too far. Norah kept pace beside him, reins loose in her hands, her posture relaxed in a way that hadn't been possible weeks ago. The horses picked their way through thick brush, and when they reached the rise, she pulled her mare beside his and looked down over the land. "It's bigger than I thought," she said. "I only use that back stretch when I have to," Gideon said. "Too many cougars in the low pines." She shaded her eyes. "You ever think about building something higher up, a lookout post maybe?" He shot her a side glance. "You planning to take over my whole ranch?" "No," she said, smiling slightly. "Just thinking it's easier to guard something when you can see what's coming." A gust of wind lifted her hair. She turned her face into it, eyes closed for a moment. "There's a church in Virginia City," she said. "Small but whitewashed like something out of a picture book. I used to sit in the back just to listen to the hymns, even if I didn't believe a word of them." "What did you believe?" She opened her eyes. "That people can decide who they'll be, even if no one else sees it yet." He looked at her then, her profile still and strong against the sky. "I see it." She met his gaze. "I know." On the ride home, the silence between them was full and settled. When they reached the barn, Norah dismounted and unsaddled her horse without waiting for him, moving with the practiced ease of someone who belonged. Inside the cabin, she set a pot of beans to boil while he cleaned the tack. When she handed him a cup of coffee, he took it without speaking, their fingers brushing. She didn't pull away. "I found something," she said after a moment. "Behind the wood pile." He raised an eyebrow. "A box with letters in it, old, from your brother." He set the cup down. "Did you read them?" "Just one," she said. "I didn't mean to. It was open and I saw my name." His brows knit. "Your name," it said, "if you ever meet someone who's been through hell, don't try to carry them. Just walk beside them until they can carry themselves." Gideon stared at her, the edges of his throat working. "He wrote that before he died, during the drought. He knew what kind of man you'd be." He stood slowly and crossed to her. "I've never had someone look at me like you do." "How do I look at you?" "Like I've already done something worth being loved for." She stepped toward him. "You have." He reached for her hand, and this time she laced her fingers through his without hesitation. Her other hand came to rest against his chest, and she leaned her forehead to his. "I still have days where I can't breathe right," she whispered. "But here with you the air feels like mine again." He closed his eyes. "You make this place feel like home for the first time since he was gone." She kissed him then, soft and certain, not rushed. When they pulled apart, she didn't step back. That night she climbed into bed while he banked the fire. He didn't ask, just joined her beneath the quilt. Her head rested against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her waist. Outside, the wind had settled. Inside, the silence was warm. They didn't speak, but neither of them needed to. The snow came early that year, soft and steady, covering the earth in silence. By mid-November, the hills around the ranch were white to the tree line, and the trails had narrowed to one passable track between the barn and the house. Gideon had built up a store of wood along the shed wall, and Norah kept the root cellar organized with neat rows of jars and sacks. Their days had grown shorter, their world smaller, but there was a kind of stillness in it that neither of them had known before. She spent most mornings at the table, sewing thick winter lining into a pair of his trousers. He worked near the hearth, repairing a broken latch on the feed bin. Though they moved around each other with practiced ease, there was a quiet anticipation between them, something hushed and waiting. One afternoon, as the wind rattled dry snow against the windows, Norah looked up from her stitching. "What's the furthest you've ever traveled?" Gideon leaned back from his work. "South Dakota. Drove cattle out there with my brother once, slept under the stars for near 3 weeks straight. Did you like it?" he considered. "Parts of it, but I never wanted to chase the horizon. Always figured I'd build something worth staying for." She folded the half-stitched trousers over her lap. "I used to dream about places I'd never seen. Ocean towns, cities with gas lamps and music in the street. I thought if I kept moving, I'd outrun what hurt." He met her eyes. "Did it work?" "No," she said. "But I think I stopped needing to." The kettle on the stove began to whistle. Gideon stood, poured 2 tin cups, and brought one to her. She took it with both hands, the steam curling between them. "I found something else," she said, voice low. "Behind the plank in the loft, a child's shoe. Small and worn through the sole." He nodded, slow. "There was a family here before me, lost their little one to fever, I heard. The place sat empty after that." She turned the cup in her hands. "It made me think about what we leave behind. Sometimes it's not even the big things, just some piece of us that says we lived." He set his cup aside and crouched in front of her. "Do you want a family, Norah?" Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "I thought I couldn't, but I don't know anymore. I only know I want to build something that holds." He reached for her hand. "Then we'll build that." She closed her fingers around his, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. By the end of the week, they had finished the coop and cleared the loft. Gideon carved a small shelf for her to keep her sewing things. She planted dried lavender in a crock above it, a faint scent of earth and memory drifting into the room. One evening, as the snow thickened outside, she laid a folded cloth on the table. Inside was a set of small wooden beads and a scrap of blue ribbon. "My mother's," she said. "I've carried it since she passed. I've never given it to anyone." He touched the ribbon gently. "You want me to keep it?" "No," she said. "I want to wear it when we marry." Gideon didn't answer right away. He stepped back, reached into the chest beneath the bed, and brought out a small box. Inside was a silver band, plain and worn smooth at the edges. "My brother gave it to me before he died. Said I'd know when to use it." He took her hand. "I know." They married 2 days later, just the two of them, beneath the cottonwoods behind the cabin. The snow had let up and the sky opened wide and bright. Gideon spoke his vows in a voice steady as the land they stood on. Norah's were quiet but sure. They spent that night in each other's arms, no barriers between them, the fire casting their shadows in soft gold across the wall. Every inch of her was known to him now, and she held him like she had always meant to. Winter passed slow. They read by lamplight, shared the same cup of tea, and carved initials into the porch rail. Gideon taught her how to read the tracks of deer through snow. She taught him how to patch a torn sleeve with invisible thread. They built a new fence in the thaw, side by side, hands raw and hearts full. In spring, Norah planted a row of corn along the eastern edge of the yard. Gideon added a second stall to the barn. They didn't speak often of the past anymore, not because it was forgotten, but because it no longer needed to be carried every day. That summer she rested his hand over her belly and whispered, "It's happening." He didn't speak, just held her close. Their daughter came in late March the following year, under a sky split open with rain. They named her Clara after Norah's mother. She had Gideon's eyes and Norah's quiet steadiness, and when she slept, peace settled over the house like a second roof years past. Gideon built a second room onto the house. Norah kept a journal filled with sketches of the land of Clara of their life. They taught their daughter how to ride, how to mend, how to speak kindness with more than words. They grew older together, days marked not by hardship but by the small certainties of shared life. The creak of the porch swing, the scent of coffee in the morning, the soft hush of her breath against his neck when she fell asleep beside him. Gideon never left that land again. Norah never needed to. Their love was not loud, but it endured, solid and steady, like the hills that held them. And when they sat side by side in the quiet evenings, hands clasped, fire low, they knew without doubt or fear that they had made something that would last long beyond them.